Hi, I'm Amita. Come right with me. Hope you've enjoyed some of the other posts. We've done craft posts before on tension and how do you make your prose come to vivid life. And today I wanted to start a little series of posts on point of view. Point of view often comes up because, and I'll tell you as we go, there are different points of view that you can use when you're writing fiction or non-fiction. And the points of view generally that are used are the third person point of view, where you go he, she, they. The first person point of view, where you say I, we, and rarely used, but also true, the second person point of view, where you will address the reader as you, or you could even address yourself as you. We will come to that. Today, for this post, I want to actually focus on the third person point of view. And there are actually two things even within the third person. And one is the close third, which is what we're going to do today. And I'm going to show you an example and talk through it. And then the other one is not so close, and it's a distant third, where you are actually kind of standing outside of all of the characters that are in your scene, and you can kind of get a little bit close to all of them, but not very close to any one of them. And that's usually a very distant third, and that's not often used anymore, but I will give you a post on that as well. So let's just start with the close third, and I'm going to give you a little excerpt this time of my third Regency novel that is coming out in April and May, depending on where you are in the world, 2025. And you can actually see the UK cover of this is here, and it's called An Unladylike Secret. These are good novels for the third person point of view because I do go quite close to my characters, so it is a close third. And it's a good way to look at the contrast because I also write in first person when I'm doing my contemporary novels, which I will do another post on. So let's just have a look at what close third actually means. So I'm going to read an excerpt of this unpublished, so far unpublished, it's coming out soon. I'm going to read a little excerpt and kind of talk through it at the same time. So as you might know, if you're familiar with my Regency novels, I actually do this thing where most of the novel is told by the female protagonist in the novel, and it is her point of view that we're in, and I use a third person point of view for her. But then the male protagonist also has a few point of view chapters, fewer than the female protagonist, but he also gets some. So in this Unladylike Secret, the male protagonist called Finn has his point of view chapters. I will also do a post on this multiple point of view business at some point, and so look out for all of these different ones on point of view because people ask me about these all the time. But we'll do Finn's point of view chapter here, and I will talk you through it. So look at this paragraph. Finn tried to tell Mira some of this, his voice tight. He was sure she would tell him to get to the point, to talk about the night that Stephen died. But she didn't rush him. She listened. No one had ever listened to him quite like that. Not since Stephen's death. Not ever. Okay, I'm going to stop here for a second. Notice how close we are. This is what we mean by a close third. So when we talk about, there is nothing in relatively speaking here, it's not too different from if I had used a first person point of view. It would have sounded like this. It would have said, I tried to tell Mira some of this, my voice tight. I was sure she would tell me to get to the point, to talk about the night that Stephen died. But she didn't rush me. She listened. No one had ever listened to me quite like that before. Not since Stephen's death. Not ever. Right? So a close third gives you similar advantages to what a first person point of view would. So that's worth keeping in mind, that when you're doing close third, which is what actually most third person points of view are nowadays, they're not the distant point of view that we used to have in like Dickens and Louisa May Alcott and even Jane Austen. They were slightly more distant. They could stand outside the person and kind of have this, kind of this top down kind of look. We don't do that so much anymore. We do tend to go close third. But what a close third does is it does give you the same advantages as a first person point of view, which is that you can really be privy to the point of view characters head. You know, what is going on for them right now. So when Finn says things like, no one had ever listened to him quite like that before, not since Stephen's death, not ever, you're quite close to his head, right? That is what he's feeling at that moment in that scene, which allows you to enter not only his actions, but also what is going on in his head. So that is worth keeping in mind, that actually a third person point of view can get so close that it is in some ways similar to a first person point of view. Okay, then we go on and we get a bit of backstory for Finn. More than 30 years ago, his father, Arthur Underwood, had been intent on marrying Margaret Brennan, the daughter of local Devonshire gentry. But Arthur had suffered from fits all his life, and Margaret's parents had said no to the match. Thwarted in love and wanting to prove that he was just as much a capable man as anyone else, Arthur left for the West Indies, where his uncle was a plantation owner. His fields worked by enslaved people from Africa to make his fortune. There, Arthur took up with an enslaved woman. A year later, Awa, who had been stolen from the Gambian river basin when she was a child and shipped to the British West Indian colonies, had Arthur's baby. Arthur had little interest in Finn when Finn was a baby, but when Finn was 4, Awa died, and Arthur brought him his freedom and brought him back to Devonshire. Okay. The advantage here of a third person point of view, even though we're still in Finn's head, remember that we're still in Finn's head, it's still his point of view. We don't have any knowledge that Finn doesn't have, yet we're able to go into backstory in a way that gives us a little bit of distance from Finn's contemporary moment, and allows us to go into his backstory a little bit in a way that's quite useful. Now, I'm going to go a little bit further here and give you even a little bit more distance from Kit. So for now, Finn is thinking about St. Kitts. This is why I keep saying Kit. St. Kitts, which is where the island where he was born. And Finn says, his point of view says, he barely remembered the West Indian island, which had been hotly contested territory between the English, the Spanish, and the French, and had recently become one of the richest sugarcane-producing colonies for the English. In his dreams, he remembered a green sweep of land that jutted out to sea, with perfectly conical hills lined up in the distance like peaks of sugar icing. At night, he jerked awake to the sound of drums beating and people dancing to appease the gods of vengeance, wearing headdresses made of peacock feathers. A flavour in the Portuguese markets took him sharply back to the tang of goat curry and breadfruit, flavours he had not tasted since moving to England. He remembered the 17 gunshots that would welcome some big man from England, and the ships that would bring more enslaved people from Africa, the mass graves for those that hadn't made it alive across the ocean. He thought of his pet turtle Pawpaw and the traders who had given it to him, along with cassava and coffee for their kitchen. It was his first home, but he wasn't even sure if the pictures he had in his head were real or imagined. Okay, so what we've done here is we started with Finn. It remains in Finn's point of view, but we started with him in his present moment, thinking, can I tell all this to Mira? Is she listening? No one's ever listened to me in this way, the way that she's listening to me ever before. So we're quite close to his head. Then we get a little bit of backstory. So we get a little bit of backstory about how he was born and how he came about and where his dad was and who his mum was. We get that information. It is still all a story that Finn would know. It isn't something that Finn couldn't possibly know. That's not possible because we're really close to him. But what a third person point of view has now allowed us to do is sentences like this one. He barely remembered the West Indian island, which had been hotly contested territory between the English, the Spanish, and the French, and had recently become one of the richest sugarcane producing colonies for the English. Now, if you were in your first person point of view, you could still do that. You could still say, I barely remembered the West Indian island, which had been hotly contested territory between the English, the Spanish, and the French, and had recently become one of the richest sugarcane producing colonies. It doesn't quite work because in a first person point of view, you are now giving us what is essentially political geography. right, for just a couple of lines. And it's a little bit harder to do that when you're in your first person. It is not impossible. You absolutely are able to do it. But what happens sometimes is when you're giving that kind of layering of history or the contemporary situation or politics or culture or whatever it is, the kind of the outside stuff, and you want a little bit of distance from the point of view character, a tiny little bit of distance so you can see a little bit out, you can scope out. At that point, having actually a third person point of view is quite useful. It's not necessary, because I will show you when I do my post on the first person point of view that it can still be done. But just keep in mind that there are certain genre conventions. So for example, this novel that I'm reading from is a historical novel, and it's specifically a Regency novel. Regency novels they tend to be written in the third person. They're not always, but they tend to be written in the third person. So for that reason, when I was trying to decide what this series was going to be, was it going to be third person or was it going to be first person like my contemporary mystery series? First thing that I thought of was that actually the genre conventions for Regency fiction tend to favor third person points of view, and it's historical fiction. That means that at times I will talk about the history and the location and the culture rather than just the person whose point of view it is. So to me, the logical conclusion was to have a third person point of view. It also gave me the advantage that at times I could move between, in this book, for example, Mira's point of view chapters and Finn's point of view chapters. So just having a little think, there are times I've started and I've in fact written a whole thing in third person and then gone, actually, this would have been much better in first person. I've had to change it. I have recently done that for something. So there are times where you might have to do that, but just having a little, play sometimes with what might be the point of view that might suit you, that might suit your voice, that might suit the genre, that might suit the conventions of the time period you're writing about, and that might suit your purposes, essentially. What are you comfortable writing in might help. So just kind of trying it out and thinking, how do I do a close third, is often a useful kind of experiment for you as a writer. So I will do posts on all the other points of view to keep those in mind and come back and visit. Do subscribe, it's free with your Google account, and it will mean that you will never miss a post. So thank you for listening today, and I will talk to you soon.